is there a concern of with too much protein, my lean body mass is 66 kilos, and I like to eat about 1 kilogram of beef daily, but usually around 700. And using Bart's formula for protein intake, I'm a little high. Well, it depends on your physical activity, Martin. It's how much protein you should basically look at it from a perspective of what sort of physical activity. Now, if you're sedentary, you probably don't need as much. If you're sitting around, even Bart sits around most of the time because he's just on the computer. He's not basically bodybuilding or lifting or anything like that. But if you're physically, doing more activity, let's say you're outdoors and all that, well, you don't want to be taking 1.76. You want to be taking about 2.2, because you're going to be basically requiring far more. If you're quite physical, you may want to go up to 3. And if you're extremely physical, you may want to go up to 4 grams per kilo body weight. So it depends on a lot of things. I mean, the Sand people of the Kalahari, the Bushmen, as this is based on research done by, Cordain, Lauren Cordain, the paleo guy. He went and he's done research on them, and they were doing, some of them were doing up to 4 grams per kilo body weight. But these guys trek through a sort of a very arid type environment, semi-desert, over vast distances, carrying stuff over vast distances as well. So they are physically doing highly exhausting, they are really physically hard work walking and carrying stuff, and then carrying their kills back over many kilometers back to the tribe. So, these people, their requirements for protein are much higher. Others can be lower. So it can vary quite a bit in that regard. So, I mean, yeah, what may be high for some person may be, low for another person based on their physical activity. So it's not one fixed, and I don't think Bart actually said that. And I think he's quite clear for what he gives his recommendation of the 1.76 is for that general people. He recognises that people like Jonathan that do more physical stuff require more.
I've asked him about this specific question and pitted your thoughts up against his thoughts before. So I've talked to him to death about it, basically. He recommends 1.75 grams per kilo of lean mass. So your muscle mass weighs in the absence of fat. So for me, I weigh 90 kilos. That puts me at about 190-ish grams of protein per day. I can do that if my fat intake is very high. But at the same time, some days I don't want to eat very, very high fat. Sometimes I have more of a taste for high protein. So I think if you're following your hunger signals, it's a better indicator of what you need. So if, for example, your muscles are always sore and you work out, then, I'm not going to fit in the 1.75. I might fit in the 2 grams per kilo.
Yep.
Bear in mind, I'm a very sedentary person apart from going to the gym.
Yep.
I do a slightly lower volume training in terms of the amount of sets I do, but very, very, very high intense, like training to failure. So, that kind of comes into play with it as well. If I was, for example, walking around all day, I was a postman, my protein turnover would be, a different amount.
Precisely.
So I think that, yes, you can do it, but what Bart's saying is the average person walking around the street, 1.75 grams plus or minus 5%.
Yep. So, and he's right about that. I'd agree with him. For the average person, that's probably all they need. For the non-average person, their requirements may be much higher. And need to keep that in mind. So you need to basically go from that baseline further up. G'day, Lukey. So Lukey's just got up.
You're right, Luke.
Yeah, he must have just got out of bed. So we need to keep that in mind. I mean, I do about, when I'm not physical, when I'm just my normal sort of things, I'm doing about 1.8 1.7. It varies. It's not really strictly 1.76, be 1.6. Sometimes I'll go 1.9, can vary all over the place. But the days that I actually do, I've got one day in the week that I do weights, not any, so I'm pretty lazy in that regard. And on that day that I do weights, pretty much I do about 2.5 grams. So, and sometimes up to 3 on that day.
Yeah. The way I work it with clients is, of course, I take into account fully what they're doing prior to speaking to me. If they were doing 400 grams of protein per day for whatever reason, I wouldn't take them down to 1.75 grams. I'd lower it down a bit. I'd measure their recovery. You'd speak about their performance outcomes, the sleep, digestion. You factor it all in together, your appetite, what changes and what doesn't change. Then you get it from there. So I think, guys, we can't be robotic about these things. We can't be exact to these numbers.
Exactly.
It's impossible. That's why Harry's goes up and down. That's why mine goes up and down. That's
Listen
why
to your body
people
as
have
well.
different amounts. Yeah.
Yeah.
See what happens to your body.
Yeah.
If
people are eating meat and then they go, "Oh, I'm feeling hungry all the time," some people get that. I go, "Well, you're not getting enough fat. That's why. Eat more fat." It's usually you're not getting enough fat because the problem is most supermarket meat is quite lean. There's not enough. A lot of fat gets trimmed off, and most people, once they eat enough fat, they don't feel like they need to eat more protein. So it's really, it's not a hunger for protein. It's a hunger. If you've eaten enough fat and you're still feeling like I could do it with a bit more steak, then you may, that would be an indication you probably need a bit more protein for whatever reason. But I would highly doubt that. I think it'll be, once you get enough fat in, you'll feel satiated and you go, "Oh, I feel fine now." So that's what I find,
definitely.
even with myself. I have a bit of cream or I have a bit of butter or whatever, and then gone away.
One more indicator as well that I notice of people that eat too much protein but can't quite suss out what they need to do is they also drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
Like loads of water. Like Dr. Chafee, he eats a lot of protein and he was drinking 9 litres at one point.
Yeah.
I've got slightly more muscle mass in my 6'1" frame than Dr. Chafee.
Yep.
And I weight train more religiously because I'm a bodybuilder, that's what I do. I drink about 2 litres per day.
Yep.
You see what I mean? So I don't overdo the protein.
Yeah. But he's not getting enough fat to hydrate.
I believe so. Yes, that's my thought. I don't know, but that's my guess. Yeah.
And to convert protein into a substrate of energy is really hard for the body. So it's not a good idea. And so the water requirement goes up slightly. And that's probably what was happening. He wasn't getting enough fat.
With more protein as well, Harry, if you're eating, say, 4 kilos of beef or something ridiculous a day, to make that palatable, past the point of hunger signals, you need to add salt to that.
Yeah, exactly.
You need more water to deal with the salt.
Precisely. Yeah.
So I think the key takeaway, I won't take it from you, but like the key takeaway I think is listen to your appetite, get the exact protein amount you need, the exact fat amount you need, and it will take you time to realize what there is. There's no definitive amount.
Precisely. Exactly. Oh, Shelley's here. G'day, Shelley. Yeah. I mean, that's probably the big one. I mean, I've done videos like, remember that rat that was doing about 70% protein and just became a big, massive friggin' rat. Now, no human that takes, remember they have a high metabolic rate. So they can build up tissue rapidly. Something that they can do in a couple of months would take us a decade, equivalent time. So it's not the same thing. But that was just to make a point to people that high protein will not kill you. That rat was super lean and super, super strong compared to all the other rats. That was just to make a point that, that protein isn't damn toxic. But also they were getting the rat becoming jittery in the end before they killed it, which tells me that it actually had become too lean. It wasn't getting enough fat. or a fat source or some energy source, whether that was a glucose-based energy source or a fat-based energy source. It wasn't getting enough at that stage. That's why the rat was becoming highly jittery. Understandable. So, but they were trying to show a point that, you know, you can actually maintain a very healthy rat, very lean rat. So it's not an issue, and that was what it did, is to fight at people and say, well, you know, guys, stop being too overly concerned and too oversensitive on the protein side. But as humans, we also have big brains. Compared to other animals, we have big brains. And so for us, fat is way more important compared to even the chimps. You know, you look at the chimps, like the males, as a percentage of their body mass, their fat stores are 0.005. And the fat stores for the females are slightly better, multiple times better, quite substantially higher, but still substantially lower than that of humans. So our primary energy is fat. Whether we convert excess glucose to create that fat as palmitate, the 16 carbon stuff that we can actually cleave off to make ketones and all that, that's the best way to store is palmitate. Everybody criticizes palmitate as being bad. No, it's the preferred storage fuel of humans. That saturated fat, it's stable and it's the preferred form. You know, reductionists and crackpots get it wrong because they associate it with all these other things because of the Randall cycle. Well, you know, no, just because you're inflaming yourself and you can't store excess energy and you convert it to palmitate. Palmitate is not the problem. It's actually a safe way for the body to store that excess energy. You know, they're confusing and conflating one physiological state with how the body tries to deal with it. Yeah, typical, you know, how they do it. So, yes.